Good day, afternoon, morning, evening, night, whichever time you decide to pick up the phone and listen to this podcast. It is I, Austin Guy, doing another commute, except instead of going to work, heading back home. Hit a good amount of traffic, was trying to just mess around on the app too a little bit and see what all it offered, what options were as far as like apparently I can monetize the show. Not gonna lie, knew about that beforehand. Just because when I had the app downloaded, it was still Anchor, and Anchor gave everyone the opportunity to just make money off their podcasts. And then Spotify bought them out and kind of changed a few things. So I was just checking that out to see what all that entailed, not just how it works or how much you would get paid, but like what info it needed, just because I was still like messing around on trying to get a Patreon set up. Just takes time and energy that sadly right now I don't got. Even still, up to 4 views or 4 plays now on episodes. So thank you, awesome viewer, listener, for giving me a shot on this lovely, lovely show about me just driving and listening to my ramblings. But I wanted to mainly, because I mentioned it in last week's episode, theme ideas I wanted to discuss, and I decided I wanted to discuss Halo just because it's been on my mind, but not just Halo as a franchise or Halo overall, but more specifically, Halo Reach. Brought this out just because had a long distance family member essentially pass away. He wasn't my father-in-law, but he was the grandfather to my older kids, and unfortunately, he passed away at least about some time ago, um, and we never really ended on a bad note. Even though me and his daughter broke up, and we had the kids. He still respected me, and still did his best to keep in touch and look out for me. Or just check on the kids and myself and my mom whenever he could. God bless him. He still loved us, still saw us as family, and he understood life gets in the way. Life happens, especially with dating and then a marriage, having my own family, and taking care of the kids essentially. But me and him bonded over Halo, and then he got in big with my friend group at that time. So all of us would actually get together and play Halo. And it wasn't just something that he kind of got into just to kind of seem cool or kind of seem hip. Some of it was just because, we're at home hanging out and we're not doing stupid shit out on the streets, keeps us out of trouble. Uh, that was one major part of it. But the other part was he actually enjoyed it. He was prior military, and while he wasn't a combative MOS, he still had fun with it. He still loved the camaraderie. He still loved just hanging out with a group of guys and bonding over a video game where we just took turns killing each other. He had a blast. He was always up for it. It was actually became one of his favorite pastimes. And even when I saw him uh, for the last time, like this is many, many years ago, before his health really started to take a turn, he said he still played. He still kept up with. He didn't play any of the newer entries, but he still kept up every now and then with at least Halo Reach. And he loved Halo Reach. He loved Halo 2. He loved Halo 3. Because he did once he actually really got into the game, he started playing the campaigns. He fell in love with the story. He fell in love with what it was. And of course, like he was never really a PC gamer. I think he watched his son play Halo 4, and then they never got anywhere past that. Probably for the best. But Halo Reach was the one that we all just really stuck with and played with for a long time. Mainly because there wasn't like a main entry Halo franchise or entry. main entry Halo title coming out at the time. So like when Halo Reach came out, they were still doing the Halo Wars. ODST had been up for a little bit, but it would have been a long time before, probably maybe 5 or 6 years before Halo 4 came out. So we just stuck with Reach, and Reach became our mainstay. That was like the definitive title for us. And my main purpose for wanting to talk about Reach is not just the memories from my time spent with him and my friends, even though those are like much cherished times and times I will never forget. And I'm glad I had those many hours with him and my friends, uh, just having that whole experience. It was the fact of when Halo Reach was coming out. I'm not sure how everyone else saw it, but I saw it as a very interesting and hard thing that they were trying to pull off. Because anyone who really dove into the lore of Halo knew that Reach was destroyed before they even announced the game. I think it was like Halo 2 is when like they had the books come out, the Fall of Reach, and then everyone started getting more to the lore of Reach and what happened, even though Reach was briefly mentioned in one. It was like, okay, everyone knew that a lot of people who were really into it knew that Reach was destroyed. And so when they announced that they're making a game based on the events of what happened on Reach, that's when at least me, I was just like, that's kind of a hard thing to do. Because how does a video game developer make a game in which the player completes his objective and moves forward in the game only to ultimately have them lose in the end? How do you get the player to fight a losing battle but still achieve their objective and their milestones? Nowadays, it may seem like a little bit edgy and a little bit of a cop out to have the player not reach their objectives because a cutscene happens. They hit the end trigger on the game, and a cutscene, they're not able to achieve their goals that they were given in the game, and ultimately lead to the fall of Reach. And while that would still like very much play into everything that was going on with Reach, the fact that they still made it to where, hey, the player is going to progress, they're going to achieve their goal, but we just got to up the stakes and show that for every action there is a bigger reaction, not an equal and opposite, but a bigger reaction to up the ante and show that they're not jumping ahead and cutting off the head before it gets too close. The head's already there and they're just playing catch up. And that's what really just kind of made Reach very, very great and made it like really work. Uh, is you start out the game, and this is going to contain a little bit of spoilers, but granted, the game is at least about like, probably what, 14, 15 years old. If you haven't played it yet, it's on MCC, Master Chief Collection. If you pay like $15, and you can go to any used game store if you want to buy a 360 or an Xbox One, and just purchase a copy of it for probably a little more than $17, which you have to buy Master Chief Collection anyway. So you honestly probably come out on top of the same amount of money. But uh, you start the game out as Noble Six, who is your Spartan, not just a Spartan, and not the character you're playing. It is your Spartan, and it doesn't seem that way at first because Reach has a customization system that was meant to you allow you to customize your Spartan just like you kind of would in the multiplayer of Halo 2 and Halo 3, especially on Halo 3. But it didn't just stay on multiplayer. Your Spartan that you customize would be wearing his custom outfit in the cutscenes. So you were actually Noble Six, and you join up with Noble Team, and you have to check out about these rebels that were seen and maybe in the area causing trouble. You get there only to find out that it wasn't just the rebels that are there, but the Covenant has landed on Reach. And so you take care of the Covenant, you dispatch them, you then go ahead and report back to HQ that, hey, look, the Covenant's here. Um, Initiate winter contingency, which anyone who's into the Halo War automatically knows what that is. If you don't, pretty much just um, making sure the Covenant doesn't get to Earth by having intel not point to Earth. Um, and so you kill off the few squads of Covenant that you come across, activate communications to let your headquarters know. But you get taken up by you get taken down, not out, but taken down by some zealots, and realize that holy shit, like maybe we're just a little like underprepared for this. And then as the game progresses, your battles with the Covenant become on a much bigger scale. You do it at Sword Base, you do it in New Alexandria, and it's just you still accomplish your objectives, which is to either eradicate the Covenant and clear the way for operations to begin on a lot more bigger, grander missions that you feel are going to cripple the Covenant and help make sure that Reach stays safe. But after every event, uh, aside from the first mission, after every event, the stakes keep getting up and getting higher. So the second mission, when you're walking around Sword Base, after you've completed that, you find out that there's like a blank area in the map, essentially, that there's no intel on, nothing's really getting in or out, and then you go with June, who is the team sniper, and you uh, go into that dark zone. You find that there's a hidden Covenant battalion, company, troop, corps, whatever you want to call it. It is a big mess. I don't know what the Covenant rank systems are called, but you find that there's a good sized Covenant army there. And then you go on the offensive to destroy the spire that's essentially camouflaging them, um, and then disabling that spire, and at least putting a good dent into their forces, whether it's just not just the ground forces, but also like their armor, um, the ghosts, the tanks, the banshees. And then after you destroy the spire, uh, a Covenant uh, battleship, essentially, I always forget the names. A Covenant cruiser pops up and hits one of the fleet ships in the assault that took out the spire. And so it's like, oh shit, the Annies were just up, and now the fleet's here. So then you go back to Sword Base, hop on a ship, go into space, Have this awesome dogfight that if you ever played Star Fox 64, like this is like what you've been training for like those 15 years before the game came out. And then you actually board the ship, destroy the ship, and you think that you've won or you've dealt the massive blow that the Covenant that you needed to have on the Covenant to be able to move forward or at least start the initial cleanup for the rest of their army, the rest of their troops, only for the cutscene to show that right as you did that and right as you were falling back to reach a whole armada of Covenant cruisers uh, start showing up in mass, and they start circling the planet, picking spots they start blasting. And so once you get into New Alexandria, you're trying to get back to Noble Team. You're on your own. You're lone wolfing. You're lone wolfing it. And once you get to the town and you find out that hey, their city's evacuating. People are getting on ships, and the ships are trying to leave. Covenant has armor that's there that's stopping the ships from leaving by destroying the ships right as they're taking off or preventing them from completely getting out. So that way, the Covenant ground troops can go ahead and do their thing and start killing all the people. And then once you clear the way for them and they start to leave and take off, you get picked up and you get taken to one of the bigger cities, and you see in the background that while you were off fighting this battle and this battle and this battle, the bigger war is still being waged in a very aggressive way. It is being spearheaded and is just moving faster and progressing faster than you could have ever anticipated. And so now you're trying to go around and clear out certain covenant spots so that way certain people can get to evac ships and uh, get off the planet while glassings are happening in the background, while other buildings and part of the city are being destroyed in the background. And then right as you finish that area, you get hit with a glassing that is way too close, and then you actually lose a member. Now, I'm not going to give away a lot of those spoilers just because there's some of these that are just like very, very emotional. So I'm not going to say who, I'm not going to say how. And this is just because like that should at least be experienced and not spoiled. But you lose one of your team members, and then you're back. The craziest thing about Reach is while you're initially going to certain maps for certain levels before the whole big invasion really kicked off. After around the midpoint of the game, you go back to some of those locations as the glassing's going on and as the planet's being destroyed, and it's a completely like trippy thing. Just because it's not just the same levels, but it's the same levels with certain areas change. So like the area you were just at around Sword Base, um, it's flooded because as they were glassing, they were also melting, or the atmosphere was heating up. So some of the ice caps around the tips of the planet started to melt, causing the water level to rise. So there's parts of the map now that are like underwater, or at least like up to about thigh high, waist high puddles of water. And that's while you're playing the game, that doesn't necessarily register because it never really registered to me on like the 30 plus first original playthroughs I did of the game. But after someone pointed it out, and it's like, damn, like that's a small little detail to show you just how fucked you are during this war where you are progressing. You are trying your best to fight the Covenant, save the planet, or at least save the humanity, the people that are on Reach, and yet you're still losing because you're you're walking, they're sprinting. You're doing the small punches, they're doing the heavy hits. And that's just like that was part of that initial conflict of how are they going to do this? How are they going to execute this style, or how they're going to execute this game when again you're progressing forward, you're achieving your goals, but ultimately you're losing, and the one upping really plays into effect to the part where around mid game, like I said, you are not playing catch up. You're now just counting your losses and trying to minimize damage. You're doing damage control and not damage prevention. And it all culminates with, of course, you get called to back to one of the locations that you were at, which is sword base. You get taken to a secret area, find Dr. Halsey, find Cortana, and you have to escort Cortana to Pillar of Autumn, which brings out the grandiose final stage of the game to where you have to get Cortana to Pillar of Autumn. And that's when, even more so, when like the game really starts to kind of take a toll on sometimes on the players, but where the story really starts to hit home is how I should probably word it better. Because you were given this AI, and they're like, the Reach is already lost. This is the key, though, that will help us win the war. We can take this L because this L is part of something bigger. And you are given the hope for humanity. But then when you get to the final level and you realize the struggle of the beginning of it, especially if you're playing a fucking legendary, the final level is like a bitch of a time. But there's a lot of fight, there's a lot of struggle, there's a lot of like conflict just to get to the Pillar of Autumn. And it's honestly almost like a metaphor for the entire game. You enter into the game and you're like, I have this hope. I'm like revigorated. I can deliver this and we can still win. It won't be today, it won't be tomorrow, but we will win. And then you get through to that final area, and it's essentially like a firefight level at the end of it because you have to fight off waves and waves and waves of Covenant before you can hand off Cortana. And again, when you're on Legendary, holy hell, is it really hard just to single-handedly fight off waves because it's you and one other Spartan left, and he decides to man the Mac cannon to shoot out the Banshees that are flying in to attack the Pillar of Autumn. And I guess maybe like shoot out some of the Phantoms, but of course that's after they dropped off the troops that you're gonna have to like help fight off. And to be honest, like just finishing that, even on just regular difficulty, if you're just doing a casual playthrough, just finishing that is like a sigh of relief because you know you did it. You won. You held them off. You hand off Cortana, and then a Covenant destroyer or uh, Covenant cruise ship is just on the way to uh, glass the junkyard that the Pillar of Autumn is at, and looking to glass the Pillar of Autumn as well. These are not really like like just overall just an overall term for what really is going on. Like no, like when they're talking about glassing it, the Covenant uses those destroyers and battleships to emit like a heat beam that shoots out the center onto the surface of the planet, and it essentially incinerates the entire surface of the planet. Um, and the heat is so intense that it can turn sand to glass. Which, if you've ever actually tried to do that in real life, it takes a lot of fucking heat. And for anyone who's just all like, okay, cool, that still goes over my head, I kind of would need some more information to understand the impact on that. The amount of heat to turn sand, regular sand, to glass is, I think, like three. It's like up in there in the thousands, I think, of degrees. But the way that this knows that, just know that if lightning were to ever strike a beach, wherever that lightning strikes on the beach, that area you're gonna find glass in the sand. Like that's how hot it is. So like that's again, it's not just like a vague term. It's not like some slang term just saying like, oh yeah, no, they're just fucking shit up. No, like it's actually glass. It's incinerating the planet essentially, and it uses that heat beam that it was also going to destroy the Pillar of Autumn because essentially just would have melted and made the Pillar of Autumn explode and overheat. But you have to afterwards. You have to go up and man the Mac cannon and protect the Pillar of Autumn from Banshees, mainly from Phantoms, which are like the bigger Covenant dropships. Uh, and then you shoot the cruiser right in the middle, right before the glass beam shoots out, destroys the ship, allows the Autumn to leave, and then the events of Halo One happen shortly after. And then there's another mission on the end of that where it's kind of a mission, kind of not a mission, but it is like the epilogue of the game. I'm not going to give that away either because that is just like a fun thing on its own. But yes, ultimately, you meet the conclusion of what was supposed to happen. Uh, you lose, the planet's destroyed, which everyone knew was going to end that way. There wasn't going to be a rewrite to where the planet gets saved or only a portion of the planet got destroyed. But they did round it out also afterwards with like a post Halo, uh, like a post Halo 3 trilogy or post Halo trilogy epilogue on top of that as well, showing Reach reborn and being resettled. And I thought that was just a nice little cherry on top, just to kind of be like, yes, you knew you were gonna. Everyone knew you were gonna lose. You still hit your goals. The game was fun, and your sacrifice was all for naught. Like just it was a really well put together game and a really well written one and well paced. Especially like I keep pointing out, considering the circumstances of you need to lose. You have to lose. You're going to lose. There is no way around there's no way around so you can't lose. Because if you don't lose, these events don't happen. And it's not also like Spartans to just turn and run. Uh, and that's always just kind of stuck with me because, I mean, granted, Reach kind of came out at a time when video games were really starting to develop themselves narratively. Because before they always had stories. If you ever had a video game from the Commodore 64, the Atari to the NES, SNES, Genesis, it came with an instruction book, and that game book would have the story, background story for the game, and then you were just playing the game. Like not many of us really read the book, or we were just too young. We kind of just browsed through the pictures and were just like enthralled and wanting to play the game. Like even Mortal Kombat had the story in the booklet as well as the game, but you could actually read it in the fucking booklet and not on like the 30 seconds that they gave you to read it in game. If you didn't, initially just hit start game, you waited probably 5, 6 minutes for it to get to that screen. But it was always games were always let's get the player playing right away. And then once Nintendo 64, PlayStation 1 came out, Sega Saturn a little bit, it was we have room now to kind of make the narratives in game happen. Because before you had to have, and it's crazy to think about now with this generation and data size, and everyone kind of knows what data size is. Everyone kind of knows how big a photo is, um, how big a song is when it comes to data size. It's very crazy to think that a 32 kilobyte or a 64 kilobyte and a 32 megabyte card, essentially, not even like a disc, not even like a like a tape or anything. It was literally just a cartridge that looks like a RAM stick almost nowadays, if you were to compare it to anything, that held like 32 megabytes of memory, and a whole game had to fit on that. It's you didn't have enough room to for much of anything else that was not gameplay. And then when CDs came out and they can hold more, like I think it's what they're like 8 megabytes, and then up to 4 gigs. Uh, you know, then you could start doing more. You had more room for more narrative, more events, and then especially on PlayStation, which was notorious for the multi-disc games. So like Resident Evil was a double disc. Resident Evil 2 was double disc. Final Fantasy 8 was 4 discs. Metal Gear Solid was 2 discs. You had like that many discs to tell the story of the game because they started doing narratives, but they didn't have the size for it, and so you had to like mid game. It would sit there and tell you like, "Hey, you've reached the limit of this disc. Don't turn off the system. Just put in disc two, and it'll pick up, and then you will be moving forward. Since you've done everything you could for disc one, and you're never going to be coming back to this location in the same way. So it's already going to be here for you on disc two." And now you look at it, and it's Blu-ray discs have come out. Ultra HD discs have came out. 4K Blu-ray discs essentially have come out, and they can hold a lot more. A DVD could hold, or yeah, DVD could hold up to like 4.7 gigs of information. A Blu-ray disc could hold up to like almost 30 gigs of information. And now a 4K Blu-ray disc holds almost up to I think like 50 or 60. It's fucking insane. And the worst part is nowadays in gaming, this is just a small little side tangent. Nowadays in gaming, even though like you have discs that can hold the size of a game, uh, almost the size of a full game, you just now everyone's moving to digital, and so it's just the disc just has, if not some elements of the game or some information of the game on it, it's just like as like Far Cry 6, just the execution file where you put it in, and it's like, oh yeah, cool, play the game. But the rest of the game is downloaded digitally because it was like 76 gigs to download the entire game of Far Cry 6 because it wasn't on the disc. Anyway, but the fact that Halo Reach came out single disc and delivered that kind of a narrative at a time when video games were really starting to find their footing in narratives and uh, come out with this story that probably shouldn't have worked, especially for the medium that it was being told in, and it worked. And it wasn't it wasn't um, from a studio that was trying to set itself apart through narrative telling. It wasn't from a studio that was trying to find the perfect medium between gameplay and storytelling. And it wasn't from a studio that was trying to do gameplay first, storytelling second. It came from a group of writers that really wanted to make this work, and a director for the game that had a vision that could help execute it so that it can be translated to the player in the way that it was meant to be experienced and read and played. And it was like a perfect storm, even though the game itself wasn't perfect, even though it has its flaws on design, whatnot. Like Halo Reach is a really great game. Don't get me wrong, but just like every great game that even people say is a masterpiece, every game has its flaws because there's so many operating parts to a game that if a game will never be flawless. Coding is a mother, and sometimes things just don't perform as they should, which is why games kind of get constant updates um, and optimizations. But either way, for what it was when it came out, like Call of Duty was really finding really had already dug its heels into its legacy that it was already paving for itself. Because I think Modern Warfare 2 or 3 was already out when Halo Reach came out. And so you had like the course of big gamer wars of you either play Call of Duty or you play Halo kind of thing. But I believe that Reach helped pave the way for a lot of games, mainly first person shooters, to take the chance and say, while this is what we are in simplicity, we can have this awesome story that can be told without sacrificing what we are at our core. And it wasn't just first person shooters that benefited from it, but a lot of RPGs, third person gaming, third person action games, third person puzzle games. It all just really benefited from it because especially when Halo was still finding its footing storytelling wise, because 3 had already come out and they were trying to build more onto that world before they decided to expand it with 4. And ODST had a somewhat compelling story that took place in between the events of 2 and 3. It was just its own thing. And it's why a lot of people really tend to sit there and say like that is one of their most favorite Halo entries, is because not just of the gameplay and the fun times of multiplayer, but just the story overall on its own, and why a lot of people still love Noble Team and will still sit there and talk about Noble Team with such reverence and with such love. It was also a game, a Halo game, where it took chance to, because usually also at that time, player characters and your counterparts, I guess would probably be the best way to put it. Not necessarily NPCs, but the ones that were designed to be there and help you, like the Arbiter in Halo 3, um, can become, you all were expendable. And even though the player character still had that plot armor to make it all the way through to the end, that the end is still where it paid off to show that everyone was open to getting taken out and off the board at any time, and still let you progress and still work out amazing because it allowed so much that could happen and did happen to where it helped raise the stakes. It wasn't just, okay, like this person died. It plays towards the narrative because now it gives the player character a reason, even more of a reason to go do this and have this kind of action. And it's like, no, this just happened because it's war. It's real. Like you don't see it coming sometimes. It just happens. And while yes, it does fuel the player to want to avenge for that fallen comrade, when the way the story continues is you still got to be smart about this because this person just went down and now anyone else can be next. You just have to be careful because it's not something you can prevent. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. And that's also what was really great. And you do see that in some games that take inspiration from Reach when they're like, we're just going to kill off a player or a character. Sometimes they just do it just to do it, which is terrible. Sometimes, again, they do it as a pivot point, a motivational point for the player character. But to actually just do it and say, like, this is how it is, and there was nothing you could have done, really even more hits home, especially when you really start to like and develop your rapport with those NPCs, even though they're not real players, they're not real people, but yet you're just like, I am a team, and everyone functions as a team. Everyone works together as a team. You actually have AI that is coherent enough to to shoot the shit that you want them to shoot, which is very, very tough to have in Halo games and Call of Duty games. But it's you have they build that rapport with you, and it's insane how they even made that work to where when even just one of them dies, you're actually stunned and shocked by it. I mean, you might not cry over it, you might not get emotional, but it still shocks you. It comes out of nowhere, it slaps you in the fucking face. And of course, like I said, and the fact that there's nothing you can do. There's no speed running to trigger this and save the person. There's no little glimmer of hope from the developer saying, yes, this person can be saved if you do this sequence. No, it just happens. Whether you do it fast, whether you do it right, whether you do it slow, it doesn't matter. This outcome's going to be the same. And that's another reason why I think a lot of people also respected it, is because you can't just raise the stakes without loss and continuing with those losses. Because as everyone is giving their all to make sure this doesn't happen, you have to make sure it doesn't happen, you have to have some of your core get chipped away because people are going to make big plays that are going to make even bigger plays happen. Like at the escalation, it's not just on the Covenant side, but it's also on the Spartan side. And then if you ever like get the special edition, I think it's like there's a legendary edition which a lot of people got, and then there's like the collector's edition, whatever. I think that both both of them come with Halsey's diary, and it has more of the lore of Halo. And you find out that the Spartans that ones you're playing, I think are Spartan threes or yeah, Spartan threes or Spartan fours, but they're not Spartans. They didn't go through the Halsey Spartan program, so they're essentially like just other Spartans that were made by the UNSC and not necessarily by Halsey. So they do have the same uh, implants and augmentations. They are still not as effective as the other Spartans. Um, for like Master Chief's batch of Spartans. So thanks for listening to this rant, you guys. I know it seems like I just kind of cut it off real short, but I was getting so into the conversation, getting so into the talk. I've just pulled into my driveway, and gotta get a lot of things going. Gotta get changed. Gotta get dressed because we're gonna go out. We're gonna go see Mean Girls the musical today for my daughter's birthday party, and we're gonna get all fancy, have fun because they actually are gonna give us props for the movie. So I didn't mind paying for it because I do kind of want my own mini burn book. But thanks for giving me a lesson on this game. If you haven't played it, I would recommend you please, please, please find some way to play it. On the original Xbox 360 would be preferable. If you just are a PC gamer, by all means, get it on PC. Or if you just want a very, a little more optimized version of it, the MCC Master Chief Collection has it on there. So you got to buy that, and then you got to pay the extra amount for Halo Reach, and it's well worth the money no matter which way you go, and it's worth experiencing that story. Even though I did give some spoilers. It doesn't really. I tried my best to make it not take away from what you would be experiencing if you played it for the first time. I gave you a brief overall, but it's still a very intensive game. It is one of the harder games on Legendary because it had the very first achievement to complete the game on Legendary solo by yourself. Um, and that was a personal challenge for me, and I kind of regretted it because it took me like 16 hours to even finish it. But that's more than fine. That's granted, that's a lot longer than any Halo game should take. But otherwise, thank you all again for listening. Thank you for joining me on this drive. Once I figure out Patreon and how to get the link on there onto my little link dump or about me page for the podcast, I will be submitting that. Again, I won't be asking you guys for much, like $1 or $5 is kind of what I'm keeping it. Those are your only options. Either way would help, especially if you could just donate $1. Dollars add up, and I'm not going to be begging just so I can make this my full time thing. Like if you can give me $1, that is still greatly appreciated. There's a lot I can get for $1. If you give me $2, that's depending upon which store I go to, that's an energy drink. Okay, get me through this the mornings where I work or just the early mornings with the toddler. So thank you, folks. Next week I will probably either be doing the Marvel talk I want to do, or maybe even a little more of the reviews and discussions, catch ups from my 366 Days of Horror, which is always fun. I actually kind of look forward to talking about those once I kind of build up. I don't want to do a week by week just because it's going to just be like me talking about 6 movies. Um, but yeah, we'll give you maybe end of the month, quote unquote, when depending on when I'm recording it and when the end of the month actually is. Update on that, and appreciate all the listens. I can't stress that enough. Just because this is fun for me to do to get back into podcasting, and I'm actually glad there's at least one person that listens to me. So I will catch you all next time. Thank you for having this ride along with me. And until the next journey, everybody, take care of yourselves. Love y'all. Peace.